Well, inflation has hit the poor in many developing countries, especially Kenya. In September, overall inflation reached a new record high of 17.3% and continued to rise, hitting 18.9% in October. Wolfgang Fengler, lead economist at the World Bank, joins me now from Nairobi to discuss these developments. Thanks so much, Wolfgang, for joining us this afternoon. Let's take a look at that inflation number because, as I say, hitting a new high of 18.91% in October. It's a number that's been steadily rising. What's your overall reading of this number that's filtered through?
As you said, Alishia, the number is very concerning because Kenya has not really experienced this high inflation in a relatively long period of time, and being close to 20% is indeed very high, even though other African countries are in similar situations. Now, what is concerning is that core inflation for the first time is exceeding 10%, and so what has happened now is that second round effects that have been feeding through the food and energy inflation, which are now both above or close to 20%, now have been affecting the broader economy, and that's the main concern.
Of course, let's drill down into those factors because it's hard to believe that just a year ago we had inflation sitting just above 3%. We've had the weaker shilling, one of the factors coming to bear on this inflation number. But as you say, food and then fuel prices as well, other contributing factors. Since January, for example, food prices have increased by almost 25%. And that's partly as a result of international trends, but also due to Kenya-specific factors that are currently at play, Wolfgang, and especially agricultural policies. What are you making of the kind of policies that are currently at play, and is it supportive of an improvement in the scenario moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely, Alishia. And indeed, the dilemma that many poorer countries are in is that that food and fuel prices are a major share of the inflation basket. So that means if food and fuel prices move up, then the overall economy is in trouble and the overall policy making becomes much more challenging. Now, some of the food and fuel prices are external and some are domestic. External is the global increase in food and fuel prices. But what has happened since July was actually that global food and fuel prices have not been declining, and global fuel prices, which again go in tandem with the food prices, are down at $80 per barrel now broadly. So what has happened in Kenya and what are specific challenges are that domestic food prices are actually much higher than the high international food prices, and have a lot to do with inefficiencies in the agriculture sector, with protecting a few well-connected large farmers to the detriment of the poor and the poor in all areas.
Is policy now taking a turn in the right direction, Wolfgang? Because of course that's got to be one of the critical focuses moving forward.
In the end, maybe let me add on the currency situation. Kenya is now in almost a vicious circle where the higher food prices and fuel prices have translated into higher inflation and then in lower weakening shilling, which in turn makes import prices now higher, even though global prices are low. And so that's, I think, the challenge on the currency side. There's not so many measures one can take in this situation, but one is raising...
Sorry to interrupt, but we have seen government waive import duty. So what kind of impact do you see a measure like that having?
The waiving of the duty on food, especially maize, has had a very positive impact, and you can actually track down the decline of domestic food prices, which were very high in June, then back to that measure. So that was one element, but the broader structural measure is to improve the overall efficiency of the agricultural market, let food come into the country, but let Kenyan farmers be also part of the food supply chain, not just a few well-connected ones.
While we're talking about policy, the Central Bank of Kenya has come under severe criticism, under fire in terms of monetary policy. We've started to see some steps being taken in the right direction there. Question is it enough at this stage of the game, Wolfgang?
Indeed, they have taken a very critical step last time, increasing the core interest rates by 4% from 7 to 11. They're very competent policymakers in the Central Bank of Kenya. They went through difficult times before in 2008 and 2009, and I think most market observers are quite expecting another increase. But again, we'll see tomorrow how it plays out.
What are your forecasts looking like in that regard? What are you expecting in terms of where we're set to see interest rates move from here on out?
Well, a lot will depend on inflation, and inflation will still be in high territory over the next few months. I think we expect that only by early next year inflation will subside. You get the base effect of the 1 year of high inflation period. You get now a better crop coming in, the lower fuel prices feeding in, and the higher interest rates. So interest rates will be a function of inflation. At least that's how the central bank came out last time, and that's we expect them to continue to be.
In focus is that weakening shilling that we've seen, and this past week strengthening of the shilling below 100 against the dollar has come under the spotlight, and it seems to have reinforced a view that we're very close to the peak of this inflation cycle. Wolfgang, have we hit the peak in your books?
In my books, we have reached it or close to reaching it. The challenge, though, with Kenya as in other African emerging economies it's very vulnerable to shock. So if there's another external shock, and Libya was the trigger last time, then Kenya is again in a very challenging environment. So if things stay stable and there is no other additional external shock, we should be near or close to the peak.
All things being equal. Wolfgang, let's leave it there. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Wolfgang Fengler is lead economist at the World Bank.